Welcome to the MRX Influencers Podcast, where you come for the insights, but stay for the good times. I'm Dan Fleetwood, and on this podcast, I chat with the best and brightest minds in the research space. On this episode, I chat with Adam Dietrich around survey data quality, specifically around sample, and what you can do to ensure that you are getting good quality data from all of the sample providers out there. We also talk about market research trends. So without further ado, let's get into it. Hey, Mark, how's it going?
Hi, Dan. Good morning. It's Friday. It's awesome to be back live with Dan.
I know, but so you're at the end of your day. I'm at the start, so yeah, it's all good. Also, we have a great show today. We have Adam Dietrich from Cloud Research. Also has a podcast and well known in the MR world. So excited to have him on in a minute. Then we'll go over our QuestionPro Certification, which we launched this week. So we'll talk about that, and we'll get more into that. And we have some data points around electric vehicles. So this was something interesting to me as our AutoX division deals with essentially like vehicle CX and so forth, and talking about electric cars and obviously the wave of the future there. So I wanted to get some stats around electric cars. I was kind of curious about it. I think you all will be interested. Let's bring in Adam Dietrich here. So, hey, Adam, welcome.
Hello, good morning.
Hi, Adam.
Good to see you guys. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So let's jump right into it. Adam, I know that you are, expansive in the research space, from, data quality to polling to even the podcast, which we can talk about. What I wanted to start with you is around data quality. I know, obviously, at Cloud Research, you guys are focused on that with the Century product and so forth. But what I wanted to dive into, and what we kind of talked about previously, was at APOR, you gave a talk around, essentially, there's no common rules around data quality, right? Like everybody's kind of playing in their own space, so to speak. So maybe touch on that a little bit, and we can dive more into that topic.
Sure. So yeah, great question. Thank you. The world of data quality is obviously always going to be very important to any kind of market research. But what we've kind of realized over the last year is we've launched our Century product and talked to brilliant researchers in kind of every methodology and different walks of the research industry, is that everybody kind of has their own secret sauce when it comes to how they measure data quality, or I guess probably more particularly how they measure bad data quality, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Some researchers are really adamant about, they singularly focus on length of interview, right? So they find the speeders and they really focus on that, which is good, but it doesn't tell the whole picture. There are other folks who, Cloud Research, we come out of academia. Attention checks are very, very big, red herrings, instructional manipulations, things like that. And they're kind of used as like the single source for defining whether or not someone is good or bad. But there are plenty of fraudsters, right, who maybe are able to answer those questions, but then they show acquiescence bias or, aren't very truthful in other factors of a study, right?
Right.
And then there are the people who kind of take the tech route, which is, for the last 10, 15 years, we've put a lot of emphasis on like IP deduplication and things like that, and some of the tech tools. And now we've got reCAPTCHA, which everybody's familiar with from e-commerce and things like that. And really the gist of the situation is that, you can't really use single factor authentication, when you sign into your checking account online right now, you kind of got to confirm it on your phone as well as your laptop, right? And you really kind of have to do that same holistic approach when it comes to data quality. And there were a lot of presentations at APOR last week around data quality and where things are going from that perspective. And, it's always going to be a big topic in research. But one of the things that we're trying to figure out and put some emphasis on and create a conversation about is, trying to admit that there's no silver bullet for measuring it, and that you kind of have to take that holistic approach.
Right. No, I think that makes sense. There's so many different facets of it, but I'm going to put you on the spot here, Adam. Like, if I had to pick like 4 things to measure data quality, what would you pick?
Well, 4 is a lot more than like a lot of people use, right? So 4 is good. Four is a step in the right direction.
3 then. I need to pigeonhole you in here a little bit, So 3 to 4.
I think it's really, we kind of put what we call just like generally bad actors into 3 separate buckets. And these are very generalized buckets, but it's speeders, which is, something that everybody's familiar with. The other one is fraudsters. So those are the people who are real, who probably are in the country or that you're trying to field the study in, but they're just going to their main objective is to get the incentive, right? So they're going to say that they are a PhD with a 6-figure income and all this experience and things like that because they want to make sure that they qualify. Right. And then the last group is like the bot fraud programmed, programmatic cheating kind of a thing. And if you kind of as long as you make sure you're using addressing one facet within each of those, right? So with speeders, LOI is a good way to start. With fraudsters, it's, we have a system of questions that we've developed and validated, but, think of attention check questions, but making sure that they're people who are being consistent and not just saying yes to everything, right? They're not exhibiting acquiescence bias to make sure that they get that sweet $50 incentive for participating in the study. And then on the technical side, it's as up to date as you can get. IP deduplication is great for making sure that somebody doesn't doesn't replicate 100 times over, but there are a million other things like digital fingerprinting, which has become more commonplace, things like CAPTCHA, like we said before. But as long as you're trying to address each one of those three, you're putting yourself in a better place.
So your advice would like each one of those three, if you pick something from it, then you're in good shape from a data quality or initiative, you think? Is that? Yeah,
you're definitely putting yourself in a better place, right? Okay. It's really been eye-opening over the last year for us and the great team at Cloud, because they're really, really smart, experienced researchers who really have like gaps in what they're looking at when it comes to data quality. I think a lot of us get into some area of comfort with knowing like, okay, as long as I kick out the 10% of sample that is the fastest, and I ask this one, red herring question, I'm fine, right? But that doesn't maybe necessarily take care of bots or programmatic, fraudsters and things like that. And so it's always just about expanding. And I think the most important part of it is, we've seen over the last year, especially like how much more sophisticated we can be with online research, as brands and agencies and things like that. And it's also important to remember that the bad actors are also getting more sophisticated as well.
Yep. And I think we definitely during the election cycle during the last election, it was just like, I know we were seeing completes from like a middle of the lake in Kansas, and these, Tim, who I'm sure is watching, is like laughing because we always bring this up, right? And it's like, what? Like, there's no way unless there's like a giant boat or something. So I think it's like, you see things like that and it really leaves a bad taste in your mouth. So you want to do things to help, prevent that. Obviously, I think that probably fell into more of your third with like, the bots and so forth trying to take over there.
Yeah. And I think that's actually a really good example because, a lot of technology around like location-based data, like geo-IP addresses and things like that, we're not at 100%, capabilities, like not as an industry, but on the whole, like even Google, there was a study done recently by some researchers at Northwestern University about the accuracy of Google local advertising, where and I think it was something about 85% of people were not in the same city as Google thought they were, right? Because they're using things like VPN networks and things like that, and things pinging here and there. They just haven't been correctly charted in that kind of system. So, so in that example, with a lake in the middle of Kansas, it could be a perfect survey respondent in California who's using a VPN. Something's happening, there's all kinds of issues. So it's really about combining as many different kind of factors as you can.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And I know one of the things you've talked about before too is more of like the behavioral psychology aspect of it and bringing in some of those particular questions. I think that's something that's really interesting because it can not only attention checks, but I think also like red herring kind of questions and so forth. Like, I think maybe it's one of your questions, but it's like, can you name every Olympian that's ever participated in the Olympics or something like that, right? Like, that's a question I love to bring up because I think it really drives home, like, no one can really do that, right? So questions like that, I think, are super interesting too.
Right. Yeah. It's all about developing just, new and innovative, I guess, ways to root out bad actors, right? So so for so long, the bad actors were just, like I said, trying to use tech and bots and things like that. And now you've got real people who are going to give you the 15, 30, 60 minutes, however long it takes, but they're just going to practice acquiescence bias like that. They're going to say, of course, I can name every U.S. Olympian. I can name the child of every U.S. president. I can, all these different things. And so what we've done is tried to use some, like you said, some behavioral based questions like that, and validate them. Right. That's the biggest thing. So many people have a red herring kind of question that they've used for 10 years. And what we've done is in testing is found that the 3 or 5 most common red herrings that we see used, they actually disproportionately remove lower socioeconomic status respondents. And again, it kind of goes back into that single factor authentication kind of a thing. Is, at the end of every study, lower income, younger people, people of color, those are always the quotas that are the last to fill. And those are the people that are more likely to be removed by red herrings that maybe aren't the most fair. So it's an ongoing battle, but it's fun and it's important as the industry moves forward.
Right. Do you think that'll ever get to like an agreed upon set of like, okay, this is good data quality, these are the standards? I know, or is it always going to be like the 5, 7, or 10 point scale, and there's always going to be some like, staunch people on each side of it? What are your feelings there?
I don't know. I don't think we'll ever get to a completely agreed upon, this is good, this is bad, this is a good metric, this is a bad metric. And I think that's probably due to the fact, like I said, that it's kind of an ever-changing landscape of bad actors. And I also think, research is very personal, right? There's like, as a researcher, you automatically kind of have this, this belief that you're obviously an expert, and this set of questions that you learned and have developed and honed, like everybody, kind of wants to have their own personal pride in things. And I think this is good. I think this is bad. And, thankfully, because of things like Live with Dan and the APOR conference and stuff like that, we can have good debates on it. And I don't know if we'll ever get to an agreed upon set of metrics.
I think like awareness is like the first thing, right? Like let's get everybody aware of like, I think everybody wants it, but it's like, I think they need to be more aware that like, this is something that needs to be addressed and changed. So it makes sense. Awesome. So let's dive into the podcast. So it's the Ride podcast, right? You and Adam Jolly host it, right?
Yeah. Thank you for asking.
What does Ride stand for? What's the acronym?
Sure. So it stands for Research, Innovation, Discussion, Exchange, which is a mouthful, which is why we created the acronym.
Right.
Nice. But yeah, Adam Jolly and I, we longtime colleagues. He's kind of like my mentor and big brother in the industry. He's an executive at Paradigm. And he and I are big like sports podcast fans, like pop culture podcasts, things like that. And I think we kind of realized that we don't have the polish of, you had Jim Brazil on a few weeks ago on Live with Dan, his Happy MR podcast, like it's so perfect, right? Like it's bite-sized. There isn't an or a pause or anything like that. Like I think Adam and I realized that we probably didn't have the hosting capabilities to kind of put out a perfect example of that. So what we've tried to do is create a little bit more laid back, less polished version of research podcast. And we do like updates, we do polling updates, but the big thing is we do guests from our all around market research who we think are being innovative, and just ask them questions about where the industry is going.
Cool. No, that's awesome. I think your podcast is polished, so you're selling yourself short there. But maybe I need to go back and listen to season 1. Maybe
don't go too early. Don't go.
Okay. All right. What are some of the highlights or moments that you think people would be interested in? Like any ahas or like, hey, this was interesting that we didn't know. Anything come to mind?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. It really spans the gamut. I mean, it's again, like I said, it's not, it's way more laid back than kind of the traditional professional podcast. But that being said, like we've had everybody from, a former CEO of Nielsen talking about when he was the CEO, what they look for in companies to acquire, right? We've had Vivek on to talk about the acquisition process and valuations of companies and things like that. We've had, startup entry, so like the big companies, we've also had startup founders that are, bootstrapping it and trying to grow things and talking about what they see in research as kind of an outsider that needs to be changed and things like that. So, we really have had we've been very fortunate to have a good smattering of guests from all across the industry. But I would say the big thing is, I think that the biggest takeaway has been that during the pandemic, whether it's qualitative researchers, quants, folks in North America, internationally, everybody in all these different sectors I've realized has a little bit more stomach for innovation, because I think it's kind of been forced on us by the pandemic. And that's been really, really cool to see. I think for so long, everybody's thought of the research industry as kind of slow moving. But
100%.
It seems like we're in high gear now.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. The pandemic definitely pushed some things forward, which I think is good to get people to try things. But one thing I think you guys do really well in the podcast, like you said, is mix in a little bit of business and pleasure, I would say, right? So there's one of the things, I know you do this halftime where that you talk about interesting things. So one I was listening to recently was around, I think it was celebrity CEO, board members, kind of positions that you would put them in. So what was your board? Do you remember, or what was your sort of C-suite executive team looking like?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So every week we do like a 10-minute, just kind of silly merging pop culture and sports or whatever with research, kind of just fun game. And so that one, I think I had, oh my goodness, I had George Clooney as my CMO, because he had success with that tequila company. And also I feel like, if he comes in and, into a client pitch and says, who's going to say no to him?
That's true. I like that.
I think I had Emma Watson from Harry Potter fame, and a huge women's rights advocate as my CEO, because I think she went to an Ivy League school. She also comes with like the Harry Potter fan base. And so I was like, we got some built-in fans immediately, things like that. And so, and I think I made Oprah my CFO, because it would be nice to have a billionaire CFO as well.
Sure.
So.
Sure, that's interesting. Nice. I'll have to think about that and who would be on mine. I'm not sure, but George Clooney's a solid pick there for the CMO.
Right. I mean, he's not just an actor. He's had success in business.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. It's a silly game, and like I said, we play 100 of them, but it's always fun. And the coolest part about those silly games is, and I'm sure you've seen this with Live with Dan, is for example, do you go back and watch these, or
sometimes I do. Sometimes
okay. I can't stand to listen to myself on podcast form, and I'm kind of like not embarrassed by it, but it's awkward, and I hear all my ums and I speak so slow and, all those kinds of things. But it's always really, really cool when, somebody who I admire in the industry says, comes back and is like, oh, I saw you put me on your Super Bowl market researchers team. Thanks for that. And I'm like, why are you listening to that? But it's cool. It's really cool.
No, I know what you're talking about. But I think it's interesting to go back and listen to yourself or watch. It's like, well, I do that, or I say this, so it's interesting. But no, that's awesome. Well, hey, Adam, I think we can wrap it up. I appreciate you coming on the show today. You're welcome to stick around, or you can take off. We're going to be going over some data points and also talking about our certification. So it's up to you, whatever you want to do.
I will definitely stick around. I'm really interested. You guys are talking about electric vehicles, right?
Yeah. So we use one of our platforms internally and also externally that clients are using as instant answers, where you put a question in Slack, it goes out via API, gets the data back and presents a graph inside of Slack as well. So it's something that we're doing. First, I wanted to bring up our certification that we just launched. So this is something that is brand new that we put together. So there were a lot of folks internally that should take more credit than myself on this particular initiative. But one thing we launched is this QuestionPro certification. So there are 2 levels of it. If you go to certification.questionpro.com, Mark will put the link in there. You can first become a pro. That's the first level, more basic techniques, question types, logic, and so forth. And then expert, which covers more advanced analytics, including question types, logic, and so forth. But this was really like an outpouring from our clients and people in the industry that wanted some level of certification and really ways to add to their resumes internally, externally, and just be certified within QuestionPro. And also this is great just for market research knowledge as well. So I would say if you're a student or starting out, definitely utilize this, put this on resumes and so forth. It can help you stand out. And we're piloting this at a lot of universities, and also clients have now started to take it this week. So it's an exciting initiative here. One thing that we've done is everyone internally at QuestionPro has taken the certification. So they'll get these badges, the pro and the expert, and then also the certification. Here's Mark's. So Mark, you completed this course early on.
I struggled through it, but it was fun.
What's that?
I struggled through it, but it was fun.
Hey, the struggle makes you stronger, Mark. Okay. And then, so there's the certificate for pro, certificate for expert. So these are things that you'll get once you complete each of the different courses. So something exciting, definitely check more into it. Go to a certification, or you can go to questionpro.com/certification, and then that will route you directly to the course. So take a look. Let us know if you have any questions, feedback. We'd love to hear it and get you certified. All right. So what I wanted to do is jump into some electric vehicle chat. So I should say that this is out of 150. Each one of these is 150 respondents in the U.S. We used our instant answers tool, like I mentioned earlier, where you put the question in Slack with the answer options, you get the chart back. So this was largely, we were talking internally about electric vehicles and obviously the rise, because a lot of our clients in the AutoX space, this is one on their top, priority list in terms of, hey, electric vehicles. It's obviously, we've seen the rise of Tesla and others out there, that this is something that is obviously here to stay, and it's something that I know a lot of automobile companies are thinking about. So I had a question that I wanted to ask, like, what percentage of the cars in the United States are electric? So Mark, do you have a guess here? Which one do you think is right?
Yeah, I for sure would have thought it's 5% or less. I really can't be sure. No.
All right. Adam, what do you think? Do you know?
I'm a car guy. I think 3% of cars sold last year were electric.
Yeah, you're right, actually. So it's 5% or less. And I think one of the sources, there's a lot of sources out there, obviously, but yeah, it's 3% or less of all cars in the U.S. are electric. So it's either 2 or 3%. I think 3% sold last year, but then 2% of overall cars, something like that. So I'll still give you the points for that one.
Thanks.
So this is interesting. I think obviously most people thought it was 6 to 15% there. So kind of interesting point there. A lot of people still almost 27% or so got the right answer. So that's interesting. And then moving on. So intent to purchase. So in the next 5 years, would you consider purchasing an electric car? This was a little bit surprising to me. 66% said yes. 34% said no. So interesting. I'm interested to see where the technology goes. And on the next slide, which I think is a little interesting, is what's your top concern regarding electric vehicles? So for me, it's range. I think this is the number one concern for me. Adam, what do you think? You're a car guy. Do you have an electric car? Would you get one?
I do not have an electric car. I think it's an inevitability that I eventually will. But yeah, I think they call it like range anxiety, right? Yeah. It's this thing where you're 20 miles from home and it says you've got 22 miles to go, kind of a thing, and your range left. And I can see why that would be the number one concern. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It's almost similar to like your phone battery, right? Like
exactly.
You get anxiety when it's at like 5% or 10%. So I don't know that these cars have like a low power mode where it can only go certain miles per hour. Shuts off non-essential functionality. So I think range was obviously the highest concern. That didn't really surprise me. I think vehicle costs and safety were somewhat interesting. I think they're safe, but I don't know if people were thinking more in terms of like the self-driving cars and that sort of thing that you hear about with Tesla. And then also the vehicle cost was surprising. I think the price of electric vehicles has really come down, obviously in the past few years, and I think that'll continue. But some interesting things. One of them was the environment, and more to that question was essentially the environmental concerns with building the batteries and all of the things that go into that. So that was pretty low, but range, I think, no surprise, was, kind of the winner there. So those are the data points that I had today around electric vehicles. Hopefully that was interesting. I think with that, Mark, we can end the show. Adam, thanks again for joining us. It was awesome to have you on.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thanks. And see you guys.
Have a good day, everybody. Thanks so much for listening to the MRX Influencers podcast. If you want more information about QuestionPro, go to QuestionPro.com. If you want to follow me, feel free to do so on LinkedIn or Twitter. Until next time, we'll see you later.